Hi there, welcome back to the channel. The year is almost to an end, so we will look at what to do in your gardens in November. November really is the last chance to get a few jobs done in the garden. There is still time to plant out winter flowering plants such as skimmias, pansies, violas and primulas. They will add that little pop of interesting colour in your gardens throughout those more quiet months. You still have time to plant out some bulbs if you haven't finished planting them already. Things like the tulips can go in still. As well as finishing up planting out any bulbs, you can still sow garlic. You can still take hardwood cuttings from things like currants, blueberries and gooseberries. You can sow things like rocket leaves that you can harvest throughout the winter if you keep them indoors. You may want to raise some of your pots and containers from sitting on the ground to prevent any waterlogging in those pots. Do try and ensure that your pots have holes in the bottom and remove any pots that may be on trays so they aren't sat in water over the winter. As your perennials have died back and have started to go into their dormant phase, you can protect them over the winter using things such as mulch, cloches. You can use fleece, keep them in greenhouses or polytunnels. This just helps to protect them during those winter months and the heavy frosts and snow that could potentially be on the way. Dahlia tubers can be dug up after the first frost if they are outdoors. If you are digging up your dahlia tubers, do make sure that you fully dry them out and store them in a cool, dry area. My dahlias are in my polytunnel, so I tend to just cut the stems back and then store them in the soil in the polytunnel like you would if you dug them up and put them in containers in soil. Just leave them over the winter to go dormant and they will start to reappear again with new shoots in the spring. Be mindful of any large branches or overhanging branches on some of your trees, especially your fruit trees like your apples and pears. You may want to give them a trim back. Now, pruning can be done between November and February for fruit trees like apples and pears. This will just help to prevent any wind rock, which is when heavy branches cause your tree to sway more in heavy winds, undermining the roots of your plant and potentially getting them to the point where they will uproot and cause quite a lot of damage. So to prevent that, just cut back any of those particularly heavy branches. They will come back again in the spring when they start to regrow with the good weather, but do be mindful of any particularly heavy branches that may cause prolonged damage to your fruit trees. You can cut back any foliage and runners on your strawberries and also try and weed out anything that might not be wanted in your strawberry beds, just to keep it tidy over the winter. If you're growing Brussels, you will soon start to see quite a lot of the actual sprouts on the stems. Now they do get very heavy, so you may want to support those before any winds knock them over. They are usually quite strong, but they do get a bit top heavy, so may require a little bit of support. You can also create a wind block or something to help protect your veg plots and ensure that your taller plants that are still growing don't get affected by strong winds. It may be the last month that you can really get out to cut the lawns in dryish weather. You want to maybe raise the height of the blade on your mowers so that the grass isn't being cut quite as short, so it isn't cut back too harshly. Another note about lawn care, over the winter do try and keep off your lawns as much as possible, especially if there is frost. Walking on frosty lawns in particular will damage the grass and also create compaction. Try and remove any leaves from your lawns as well, as they will rot and they will also cause damage to the grass. We want to try and keep it as happy and healthy as we possibly can, to ensure that we have good growth for next year. As you will have noticed, the falling leaves will start to gather up in certain areas. You can always leave leaves that have fallen if they're not a bother to you, as they will harbour insects that will be hibernating for the winter, and you don't need to be raking them up all the time. However, if they do collect in large amounts and they're going to be moved anyway, then you can definitely gather them up and use them as your compost, or use them as a mulch. I have an arrangement with someone who cleans the streets here in our little village, and he collects all the leaves up for me and leaves them in my garden so I can use them in my compost and as a mulch. He's done that for a couple of years for me now, and it's just a huge resource that would otherwise just be taken away and used elsewhere for something that probably isn't as useful for me, certainly. So if you know that there are people collecting leaves in your local area, and they usually collect them up in bin bags and that sort of thing, you can use that resource massively. It's a huge benefit to you and to your compost and your soil microbes. So try and get them, if you can, from your local councils. November is a great time to get on top of cleaning and tidying any of your garden tools. This could include just a general clean, oiling, sanding and sharpening some of your tools before you put them away fully for the winter. You can also check your greenhouses and polytools for any damage or loose screws and fix these before the weather starts to change. You can also use insulation and heaters in these areas to keep them frost free. I have seen a recent video where somebody uses bubble wrap in their polytunnel to help insulate it and stop any frost getting in there, so that might be worth having a look at. November is also a good time of year to review your year, what worked, what didn't work, what might you want to do next year, what did you do this year that you might not want to try again next year, and also to get those seed catalogues ordered so that you can start to plan for next season. So get those seed catalogues ordered, make your wish list up for Christmas, maybe give some hints to your family or relatives that might be getting you gifts of what seeds and equipment potentially that you might want for the next season, as I'm sure you would appreciate that as a Christmas gift over most things. Just a few notes about the beekeeping. Bees over winter live longer than summer bees. They're also larger than summer bees, and they retain a lot of heat. They do what is called a cluster, which is they usually gather up as closely as they can with the queen in the middle of them, and their bodies, as they are bigger, generate quite a bit of heat. This in turn can produce condensation in the hives, so you are going to want to leave a little bit of ventilation. You can also add what I know is a winter super, which is an empty super. You don't want frames or honey in there, but just put newspaper, straw, maybe a layer of carpet or something that can absorb that moisture, and you are going to want to keep an eye on that and maybe change it out so it doesn't drip on the cluster. Now that is just a recommendation, it doesn't need to be done. If you just keep your hive ventilated, then that should do the job as well. I've done hives with winter supers and I've done hives without, and both have worked as long as they have ventilation, which is usually just leaving the baseboard underneath your hives open, so moisture doesn't build up in your hives and potentially cause mold, which can be detrimental to your colonies. The main thing to do with your hives in winter from November to at least March is to leave them well alone. They know what they're doing, they will cluster, they will take care of themselves, they will go through the honey stores that you have left in the hive for them over the winter, and they will take care of themselves. They don't hibernate per se, but they don't really come out of the hive. So absolutely do not go into the hive, don't check them, They know what they're doing. You may still see quite a few bees around in November still coming out and foraging for that last bit of ivy. So if you notice there is mature ivy that has flowered, do leave it. Don't be tempted to cut it down, as that will be the last of the nectar stores that they will be bringing into the hive to survive over the winter. But in general, you're basically just going to want to let them do what they do, leave them over the winter, and look forward to seeing them again in the spring. That is it for this video, a short and sweet one this month, as there is not huge amounts to be doing outdoors. We can start to reflect on what we did throughout the year, how far we've come, what we've learned. Enjoy what you have produced and focus your energies on what you can be doing next year. But for now, thanks so much, and we'll see you again next month.